And first up, Forza Horizon 5 1080p low. Now on these Ryzen chips, I've always had really good luck with this game here, especially at those low settings. But some of the lower end chips can only handle this with these same settings here at around 720, sometimes 900p, depending on the chip you're using. But with this, we're at 1080 and it's running great. We actually got an average of 71 FPS out of this game. Not bad at all, and it still looks great at low settings given that we're at 1080p. Next thing I did was run a couple benchmarks, and keep in mind we're at that stock TDP, 35 watts on all of this. And the first one here is Geekbench 5, single core, 1423, multi, 7025. Now if I was to run this at 45 watts, we could definitely up that single and multi, but I think it's got a good balance here of performance and thermals with the cooling system they have in this unit. Next on the list, we've got 3D Mark Night Raid with a total score of 15,955, Firestrike coming in with a 3,500, and finally, Time Spy with a 1,437. So obviously these scores aren't going to match a high-end gaming machine, but given the form factor, I think it's doing a great job. So with the benchmarks out of the way, I want to get back into some more PC gaming and test a few games out, then we'll move over to some high-end emulation. Here we have Cyberpunk 2077, 720p low with FSR set to performance. With this, we could go to 900p and kind of lock it at 30, but I was really hoping we could reach a steady 60 with it, but it's hard pressed to do that even at 720p, so playing this game at 30 FPS would be the way to go. Next one on the list here is Spider-Man Remastered, 720p, low, FSR set to performance. It's actually doing better than Cyberpunk, but again, not quite at 60. Another one of those games that would perform really well at 900p, low settings, locked at 30. Now this will reach 60 FPS indoors, but you know, with this game here, there is some areas where it would come in handy, but usually, at least for me when I'm playing this, I'm web swinging, so I wanted to test it in an outdoor open area. Next one up is Doom Eternal, 720p low, no resolution scale. Now I always mention resolution scale with this game because using that dynamic FPS based resolution scale is definitely what you want to do with these Ryzen APUs. You can set that to 60 FPS and get a really nice smooth experience out of this game. Here's Elden Ring, a game that really gives these APUs a run for its money. So we're at 720p low and we can get an average of around 43 FPS out of this one. Indoors, just like some of the other games, we can reach 60 with it at 720p low, but you're going to spend most of your time out here, so that's really the way to test. And finally, for the PC gaming side of things, before we move over to emulation, we've got God of War, 720p low, FSR set to performance, 40 FPS on average. Was hoping for a little more out of this, and you can squeeze a bit more, but we just can't quite run this at 60. Even with FSR set to ultra performance, it's still right there at the edge. Alright, so now it's time to check out some emulation, and as a lot of us already know who are into emulation, these chips do a great job. The 5600U, the 5800U, and especially the 5800H. Here's Wii U using the Cemu emulator, Vulkan backend, Bayonetta 2 at 60 FPS, and this will do Breath of the Wild, but I would go ahead and lock that at 30, 1080p. Moving over to PS3 using RPCS3. So with this one here, Skate 3 Vulkan backend, I did have to take it up by 5 watts. We went up to 40 watts using APU tuning utility. And it was really odd because it's only a 5 watt difference, but we were getting a ton of dips at 35 watts. This is one of those games that really does love those extra cores and threads, and we needed to send enough power to those and the GPU at the same time. So that extra wattage really helped out with this one. But playing games like Tekken 6 or Demon's Souls, it only needs to be set at that stock TDP, and it's not even going to pull that full 35 watts. But one of the most impressive things that I tested on this unit so far was Xbox 360 emulation using Zinnia. In fact, I'm using the Canary build of Zinnia. We've got Forza 2 here. And if you tried to emulate this in the past, you know how hard it can be to run, even on higher end chipsets. But with all of the new updates to Zinnia, we're getting some great 360 emulation on these Ryzen APUs. And you could even do Red Dead 2, not at 60, but at 30 FPS. So when it comes to power consumption, this is plugged into a kilowatt meter, and keep in mind this is total system, the whole little mini PC, not just the CPU or the GPU. Idle, 12 watts from the wall. Average gaming, 52 watts. And in an extreme stress test, I was able to get this to pull 71 watts, which was quite a bit, but keep in mind that's an extreme test. You will never see these if you're just doing normal stuff, even gaming with this PC. CPU temps actually look pretty decent given the confined space this thing's in. Idle, 38 degrees Celsius. Average gaming across all of the games and emulators that I tested in this video, 79 degrees Celsius. And I was actually able to get this to hit thermal throttle in a 10-minute Cinnamon stress test. It was about 6 minutes into it that it hit 94 degrees Celsius. And you know, I kind of expected that because we're totally maxing this out at 35 watts for a prolonged period of time.